I want to welcome you all to teachingrhetoric.com presents Pop-Up PD. My name is John Muscatello. I am a teacher at a school here in Princeton, New Jersey, where I live. I've been a teacher for the last 19 years. I'm the founder of Marco Learning, but I spent 16 years at the Princeton Review, working on books, working on professional development for teachers, working as a teacher and a tutor. I taught a lot of reading comprehension. I taught a lot of digital exams. So I'm your test prep person. And it's funny because I was looking the other day at the Mosaic conference from 2020, and there were a few different presentations about like burn down the test. Well, the test is in 5 weeks, so we're not burning down any tests. This is all about test prep, and I'm going to do the best that I can in this session to show you what the test prep industry is like, what some of the insights that we have are, and how I can help you on some of these different things. It's great to see, by the way, everyone who's joining us here in the Big Marker event. Jody, Christy, everyone, please keep posting your questions in the Q&A tab. I'm happy to answer them. So I'm going to start with an overview of the 2021 AP exams. I'm going to move 1,000 miles an hour because I don't want to get too bogged down in that. But definitely, I'll take a moment and kind of pause for some questions. I'm going to show you the annotation tool that College Board has revealed as part of the software, and remind you all, today is Thursday, April the 1st. On Thursday, April the 8th, we will have access to the College Board software. We will be able to actually download this software for digital exams and have our students do that. And I strongly recommend that in 1 week from today, if you have people taking digital exams in your school, and let me know, by the way, in the chat, type in digital or paper. If you are a digital, primarily paper, you can type in both. Those are your three options. I could do it with a poll, but I just want to hear in the chat, where are you all at with these digital and paper and pencil exams? If it's digital, download the software. You want to get your hands on that right away. We are in a very unusual year, but we're in a very good position that so much more information is available to us at the beginning. After that, I'm going to go through the experience of digital exams. I started teaching digital exams in 2004 at the Princeton Review when I was teaching the GRE. In 2005, I took the GRE to get into graduate school. And that was an interesting experience. And that's something I'll share a little bit what I learned about. And then very quickly and insufficiently, I will go over some really high-level techniques that the test prep industry uses for reading comprehension, comparing it across tests, these new writing multiple choice, which now that I think about it, really have never actually been tested, right? They were slated for 2020. They never happened in 2020. This will be the first year our students are really trying them on at scale on a real exam. And then we'll open it up for some Q&A. So looks like we've got some digital, some people have more time, interesting mix of people here. So this is an interesting way of taking my 20 years in test preparation and trying to fit it onto a slide. This is how the test prep industry works. And those of you who've interacted with the test prep industry before, maybe, for example, you used a Barron's book, a Princeton Review book, even Perfection Learning. Perfection Learning, AMSCO book, by the way, is the best one I've seen in this space. And I am aware of what's going on. I've worked with McGraw-Hill on their books. I've worked with Princeton Review on their books. I actually wrote some of the passages you may have taught if you've ever worked from that book. So one of my graduate school papers on medieval Spain was one of the passages I selected and then wrote questions and explanations on. So here's how the test prep industry works. Number one, the priority is to raise scores on tests and to do that efficiently. Now that seems obvious, right? That's what the test prep industry exists for. That is not what we do in our classes. It's not what I did this morning. I taught 12th grade and I taught 9th grade. We did no test prep. Those were not AP classes. I didn't get into the teaching profession to do test prep. I'm a medieval historian by training. I love what my vocation really is, which is to change my students' lives. When I'm in test prep mode, I'm not interested in changing their lives. I'm interested in changing their scores. So really for the next few weeks, like, great, we all have our pedagogical philosophy. That is not interesting. What matters is what will get scores up. And that really changes your frame of mind. The next thing that is in number two here that's very significant is the secret of the test prep industry is that when I was a fancy tutor at the Princeton Review, I forced my students to take full-length practice tests multiple times. I was the person, the parent couldn't do it. Parents are toxic of 17-year-olds. Teachers can't. Look at how ineffectual we are this year. We're just trapped. Test prep tutors have this superpower of being able to coerce students. Okay, parentheses, a lot of disproportionate number of medievalists here. Hello, all 7 of us in the world that are in this room. But it's just coming back to the time practice test. As a tutor and with those prep books, sometimes that's the first and only time students are actually looking at a full-length practice exam under timed conditions. That's really significant. I want to tell you a story I've told many times over the last couple of years, and that is about the time Mrs. Lasko, my AP English language teacher, and one of the best teachers I've ever had in my life, she did almost no test prep in her AP English class. 2 weeks before the real exam, we sat down after school. This would have been April 2000, so this would have been 21 years ago. And I remember it very distinctly. We sat for a full-length AP exam. I took this test, and I did not do that well. I was on the line between a 3 and a 4 because on the free response, which at the time where there's no synthesis essay, it was just 40 minutes, 40 minutes, 40 minutes. I spent 55 minutes on the first question. I spent 50 minutes on the second question. So I robbed 15 minutes. I robbed 10 more. I had 15 minutes for Q3. So I walked out of that test. She had scored my sample essays very poorly, especially as it got to the end. 15 minutes for an essay. That's not an essay. That's a paragraph. And I remember discovering something in that moment. And that's what number 3 is. The test prep industry is about discovering something about your own performance on the test and then doing something about it. And I said, I'm going to watch the clock very closely. I will not spend 55 minutes on that first question. I will not spend 50 minutes on the second question. And I'll tell you, I remember watching the clock. It was 41 minutes and I moved on from question 1. It was 41 minutes and I moved on from question 2. I had 38 luxurious, beautiful minutes in question 3. I walked out of that AP exam in May of 2000 and I dropped my pencil, dropped my mic. I knew I got a 5 on that test because I had looked at myself in the mirror after I took that test. I acknowledged the failure that I had, and then I acted on it. That's what test preparation does. Now, you probably are doing this. Maybe you've been doing this all year, doing it better than I can even teach you tonight. But if you have not been doing that, if you haven't forced your students, if you're able to force them to take something under time conditions and then talk to themselves, either by listening to your feedback with number 3, what I'm saying here at 3 is deep feedback, or doing that self-analysis, then you're not really kind of doing what the test prep world is so good at. Now you'll see the book I've highlighted on the right. It's called The Talent Code. I read this years ago, and I thought it was one of the books where I really began to recognize the work I was doing as a test prep person. And basically what Daniel Coyle argues in the book, it's kind of a popular Barnes & Noble kind of book, very easy to read, like a Malcolm Gladwell book. And what he really gets at that's so intelligent is he talks to tennis coaches and he looks at the best educators and the best mentors that are out there. And he finds that they're all doing the same thing. They're timing their subjects. They're providing very calm, they're not yelling, they're providing very calm, sensible feedback. And then they're having their students act on that feedback right away. And they come back through practice, more detailed, what he calls deep feedback, this very focused, specific thing. I could make a list in my feedback on your essay that says you have 17 problems I want you to fix. Or I could say there are 2. There are 2 things I want you to work on for your next essay. When I do that as a teacher, my students write much better essays. When I do that, when I'm going through multiple choice questions with my students, they do much better. And then number 4, and this is really key, is encouraging students to really stick with the plan that they've made. I will tell you a couple of other secrets about test prep that are a little bit depressing. Number 1, most of the gains that you see in the test prep world are not in reading comprehension. You cannot fundamentally transform someone's reading comprehension, and you probably shouldn't in a matter of a few weeks. What you can fix is their timing, their self-confidence, their pacing, their awareness of what's really going on. The test that they take at the end of May or the middle of May should not be their first draft. So this is what the test prep world does. Imagine if one of your students got to work with me for 10 hours of tutoring. And I forced them to take 4 full-length practice tests. And we talked through their journey of each part of this. And we went through the techniques I'm going to show you in a few minutes. Imagine how great their performance could be on test day compared to this more passive kind of what's going on the test. So that is a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Simple distillation of what's going on, but it kind of gets at some of the key themes that are going on in the test prep industry. Now, I want to talk very quickly about the 2021 AP exams as promised. Remember, when this is from a previous deck I've presented on before on the Marco Learning page, we know that the exams are full length, and the College Board has said because the colleges won't give credit for them. And so they're recommending that we use as much as we can from AP Daily and the live reviews that they are hosting, I believe, starting April 19th. To around April 30th on their YouTube channel. We've got to work with the full exams, and they are completely unchanged, of course, for AP Lang and Lit. We know that they're going to be offered in person and at school. That the kind of normal days in the first 2 weeks of May are those paper and pencil exams, and then they go digital. We know that their paper and pencil and digital, huge debates have emerged in all the Facebook groups about whether paper and pencil is better than digital. Because AP English Language, we all got away with murder again this year. Last year, you got Q2 basically dropped in unchanged, unlike the history exams, which had a whole renovation, unlike the very ambiguous, confusing stuff that was going on with other exams. At least you knew what rhetorical analysis was in 2020. You know that the digital exam is going to contain the same number of questions in the same sequence, even though we have these key differences. Kids are asking me on the social media accounts for Marco Learning all the time about which is better. The bottom line is there's the issue of not being able to go back and forth on multiple choice, which we'll talk some more about. There's the issue of being forced to type and not being able to write. Some of my students are really good at typing. Most of them are not. I don't know what happened in middle school typing classes, but I think they kind of went down the drain. And so a lot of my students are hunting and pecking. They're good at texting and emojis. They're not particularly good at typing. But typing also creates other advantages like being able to copy and paste and move around. So we know that they're in these 2 formats. I'm leading through a lot of these details. Again, we have these 3 sets of dates. We're kind of all past this. Remember the tech requirements? Of course, no smartphones or tablets are allowed. This is not the same software as what we saw in 2020, nor is it the lockdown browser, even though, as I'm about to show you, there is a lockdown mode. You cannot obviously photograph any responses or upload them by the way that we did in 2020. And you must download the software. The students must download the software between 1 and 3 days before the exam begins. Students are not allowed to share devices. And respond to me in the chat. I'm going very quickly on purpose. Let me know if you need me to stop and linger over this. You can also post those questions in the Q&A. I know Christy's answering some of those for me, which is really great. So tech requirements are very specific. Remember, Chromebooks have to be school issued. They cannot be personal Chromebooks. And if your school is issuing them, you can't just pass and circulate the devices around. So the coordinators and the tech people are managing that, but that will matter for the logistics of the exam. Remember when the exam was launched in early February, famously, there was a requirement for a camera to photograph you at the beginning of the test and a photo ID. That has been wiped away. The College Board acknowledged the equity issues, and that is no longer a requirement. So if you're seeing conflicting information, it's because that's what it was for about a week and a half or so, and what is no longer. We know that they're going to be using plagiarism detection software again, and as English teachers, we know what that's worth. We know that they will not be in the same format for a number of exams. If you have students taking AP Physics or AP US History, they're dealing with a different dynamic on those exams. Be sensitive to their stress and the overload of multiple AP exams. If you are taking a digital exam in an unusual time zone, and I saw earlier, we've got a lot of people from the United States, some Californians, some Floridians. The paper and pencil are taken on local time, but the digital exams are at the exact same time worldwide. And we know officially from the College Board, whether you are paper and pencil or you are digital, there's no open book, open note official format as there was last year. We all know in AP English Language, the test is already open book. You've got the passages in front of you. That's what you're responding to. You're not going to go find it in Atlas or Encyclopedia or in Wikipedia. For students who are in portfolio courses, I know some of you might be working with research and seminar. Remember that deadline is on May 20th. The digital exams look different. We've already gone over this. Students can back out at any time with no cancellation fees. Follow up with AP coordinators. And definitely remember the date, I'm going to highlight it right here, is April the 8th. If you are digital, your students are digital, you want to be screen sharing with them on Zoom on April the 8th if you're meeting in person or meeting in any way, shape, or form. Get them practicing the software. We have a huge advantage that the kids are going to get 6 weeks with this software before it begins. Now I'm going to share some slides from the College Board's website. I would like for you to go, if you haven't, to the Handouts tab yet. There is a, and I think I've shared it already. The College Board Digital Exams PPTX. This is the PowerPoint. You want to take a look at this. This is on their website under Preview the Digital AP Exams. You can just Google Preview the 2021 Digital Exams. You see this very happy young person who's delighted to be taking an AP exam on his couch. And a couple of things. You can download this on April the 8th. The exam will force you to go into lockdown mode. No Grammarly. It said in the long digital guide, no printing, which is important for all of us who care about those annotation things, but they have another solution. And it means that you're gonna have to turn off Spotify and all the other stuff going on that device. Now, the kids, of course, are asking me, well, can I just pull out my phone? And the answer is officially you should not be doing that. There is no camera or microphone to monitor you, but you are breaking the rules and cheating. We're strongly advising the students not to even go there. How is that even gonna help? I don't get it. On an exam, if all of us were taking this exam, we'd be, clawing our way through all the synthesis sources, having to do the work on the spot, the way the exam is designed. So that's one thing. That's one way to bring that to your students. Again, do not exit the app or open any other application. So they're explicitly saying here, no chat, no shopping, no music. They're also reminding you that they're going to have an automatic break and that they will start automatically. Once you're in the software 30 minutes before, the exam happens to you. You don't click a button to make it start. The breaks will happen to you. You don't click a button to make them start. If you leave and you go get a little iced coffee for yourself because you're a teenager and you're showing off that you're drinking coffee, and the exam's going to start without whether you're there or not. That was one thing that's clear in this digital guide. Another thing, and I want you to take a close look at this page. This is from the exam directions guide. Notice it says AP US History, and notice what this says. Please note that you are responsible for pacing yourself. The clock will turn red when 5 minutes remain, but the Proctor app will not give you any other time updates, which means for the AP US History students, the document-based question, the DBQ, and the 2 new short answers that on the digital exam are replacing the long essay question, the students manage their own time. The implication, and I could be wrong about this, so I'm going to put asterisks and qualifiers everywhere. The implication is the students are going to get the 2 hours to work through the 3 essays. But notice what it says here. I'm going to take away my other arrows and show you. Do not spend too much time on any one question, but remember, you cannot go back to a question once you've submitted it. If you're going to follow the test in order and write a synthesis, once you press submit, you cannot re-access that synthesis question again. Now, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but that's the way I've interpreted both the 100-page digital guide from the College Board and this slide deck from their website. Maybe, I know some of you are maybe.
I was going to agree with that. Actually, a question that was asked in the Q&A, and that's probably been one of the most common questions that I've seen in the Facebook group so far. And that has been the question of, and it was my first question actually as a teacher, was when you say that students can't go back and forth on questions, does that apply to FRQ also? And I agree that everything seems to point toward once that section is open, and a section would be the 3 essays, that's going to be one of the pitfalls of students who have to take digital, is that they not only cannot choose the order in which they answer these essays, but they also, it's like, here's your 3 essays, answer your synthesis, answer your analysis, answer your argument, and that's just it.
That's the inference that I'm making, that it will be sequential. So it's several key features. The time is going to be automatically set by the computer. It will be given in a block, not individually, as we see on the multiple choice, that once you submit the essays will be presented to you. I'm presuming in order. I can't confirm that 100%. And then clearly, once you submit it, there's no retouching it. So that's a very different experience from some of you might have your kids run to question 2 or question 3 first and jump around, which of course you can do on paper and pen by the time you're at free response. And so that's an interesting thing about the choreography and the experience at the exam. Yes, so again, no going back at all once it's submitted. But what wasn't clear, I think, for a lot of us, Amy, in the early days of this information coming out was whether the 40 minutes was going to lock you in for each of the 3 questions, kind of forcing your hand to meet a deadline. Now, we know what this looks like in the free response, in the multiple choice section. So what they're going to present on multiple choice is text on the left. Here's biology text. Thank goodness we don't teach this. And questions on the right. It will also provide the students with the ability, you notice this here and here, to zoom in and zoom out. So if you want to work with the text in full, you can absolutely do that and then deal with the questions. Once you submit that question though, you can, so here's that question, right? You press submit. Now look at this. This was what caught my eye. It looks like once you press C, submit or next, it's going to have a pop-up. It's going to create another transaction for the students to do to acknowledge that they cannot go back. Now, maybe it'll happen once, but I'm thinking they might repeat this throughout, where students are going to have to continually acknowledge. That might chip away at the timing on multiple choice. So we are seeing the ability to zoom in and zoom out, the ability to, and this is the exciting one, all the AP English teachers in the world rejoice, is the annotation tool that is available. You can highlight any part of a passage or question that you might want to return to, or leave yourself a note to organize your thoughts. This, I think, I talked about timing and the test prep industry's obsession with timing. This to me is a pitfall as well. How much typey, I'm going to make pretty highlights for myself. Every time you're making a highlight, you're not necessarily getting points. Now, I know that that's naive and not exactly right? You have to engage with the passage at some level, but you know what I mean. You can make 35 beautiful annotations and not be answering the multiple choice questions, not be writing an essay. And if you haven't practiced with the software, again, the practice software is available on April the 8th, and practice questions will be available on April the 8th. Get in there and try it out. They show you what you can do. You can highlight and underline. And then when you're so you can highlight color, different colors, you can underline that, and then you can type a note for yourself. The College Board slide deck kind of does it automatically, and the note they typed was, what's this mean? And then it will save itself here. You can also delete these annotations. So when I talked earlier about students being self-reflective, students being given feedback, let me give you all a really powerful tip for your teaching. Let's say it's April 10th. Your students are doing a practice something in this software. They do that for homework. They will let's say you're meeting on class on the 12th, ask them, do it with them, do a passage with them and say, what was it like? Raise your hand if any of you spent too much time annotating. I found students like talking about their own performance. Did you get nervous? Did you run out of time? It's the same questions over and over again that get them thinking, okay, what can I fix for next time? I mentioned earlier, I fixed my timing when I went in for the test. That really helped me. So a couple things here. Amy's asking my understanding from College Board is that April 8th, the software and practice questions are available in all subjects. It's not, they said, if I remember correct, in an AP coordinator webinar, not full exams, but certainly the ability to try this hat on and see how it fits on your head. And I think that that's important. Heather's point, not being able to annotate in classroom and all of that. Let's see, and I'm looking at a few questions that are pretty similar to this. I think that I've kind of answered. Melania, I'm not sure about the Bluetooth interfering with the lockdown browser, but that's an interesting technical question. If I get an answer, I will respond. Again, here's that zooming in, zooming out feature. If you have students who have any visual impairments or are struggling on a small screen, the screen of their computer must be at least 10 inches. So that's most screens. They should be able to engage with the material there. And again, the multiple choice questions, I do want to keep moving along here. Sorry, I'm getting bogged down here. Just note that in the free response section, there is this formatting. I think this is really wacky. I'm not going to recommend my students play with bolding and italicizing and underlining. But note that they can also copy and paste, and that's beautiful if students want to write a bare bones first paragraph and then add to that later. We'll be covering free response section questions in a separate pop-up PD. So I'm going to move on from this as well. Again, the no going back, once you move on from a free response question, it is gone forever. You cannot touch it. And let's see, once your test is completed, this is a really important psychological reassurance I want you to give your students. The program is apparently saving their work as they go, right? So if there's some damage, some interruption, the software is available for the students to save the bulk of their work. If they've submitted already, it might be gone and they won't have to worry about it. They remind you here, this is what it will look like early April. The published date is the 8th. They will download the app. They can start practicing. And to answer the questions that we've seen is, again, I think this is going to be in all subjects if they can hit that deadline. So what I want to move on to now is the experience of digital exams. So I said I bragged about all the tests and all the things I've done. I taught GRE, GMAT, LSAT, MCAT, verbal, TOEFL, SAT, ACT, subject test, AP exams. Digital exams are different in fundamental ways. They're different as an experience. Number one, and you can ask your students, these are all discussion questions. If they're taking paper and pencil, they're used to paper and pencil, and you have them take digitally, have them talk about those differences. One of the key differences is actually the physical choreography of taking the test. Think about this. When you take a paper and pencil test, you open a booklet in front of you, you have a pencil, you are the master and commander of that test. I think of myself as a scientist with a plant specimen, tearing it apart. I write where I want, I'm in control. I'm literally sitting over the test. When I'm taking a digital exam, I physically feel a little more intimidated. And maybe this is overanalyzing, but hey, it's a bunch of AP English teachers in here. I can overanalyze all I want. But somehow sitting subordinate to a computer screen, not knowing how to think with your hand the same way with a pencil, not being able to go back and forth, being locked, being in lockdown mode, physically, you're oriented very differently. And that's what comes out number two. It actually creates different levels of stress. So when I took the GRE for real in 2005, it was the first time in my tutoring career, I was about 3 years in, that I actually had test anxiety. Paper and pencil, again, there's that number two pencil. I'm erasing, I'm controlling things. The GRE, once you submit a question, it's gone. And psychologically, that made me panic. And that was the moment I stopped laughing at student testing anxiety or stopped dismissing it and realizing it's a very real thing. You can literally just start sweating in places because that experience is so unusual. So again, a really important tip for all of you, talk to your students, get them talking about the psychology of this and acknowledge how uncomfortable and weird and unusual it is if they're taking a digital exam. That's going to get them to number three. That's really important. The strategies are actually different. So let me give you a key strategy that I'm seeing a lot of questions about this. I'm going to come specifically to this. What do I do? How big of a deal is it for students not being able to move back and forth on multiple choice? And it is a huge deal. Here's how I see the implications. If you move too quickly, you will not be able to go back and reinvest time well on previous questions. You're going to have to sit there feeling stupid for 12 and a half minutes. And this AP exam, remember how this AP exam is set up now. It's the most favorable timing conditions, in my view, that we've ever seen on the AP English language exam, or at least in a very long time. Remember, it used to be 55 questions. That was kind of right. It was 55 questions was the old norm. Now it's 45 in the same amount of time. And these writing questions actually take a little bit less time. So the current format of the AP English language exam is actually set up to kind of luxuriate in time, which creates a question or a problem for people, because if you are taking this exam and you're moving quickly and you have this extra time, you don't want to be sitting there twiddling your thumb. So that's one issue. The other issue, of course, is if you're running out of time. I think more likely on other exams than on this one, though. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, everyone. Have you had students taking full-length sections of multiple choice and running out of time or having issues? What does timing look like? Because on exams where students do run out of time or run into trouble, the problem is there's 3 minutes left. There's going to be a warning that comes up, 5 minutes left, 13 questions. You literally have to just kill off certain questions. You have to say, I can't do 47, skip it. Pick C, move on. I can't do 48. Okay, pick B, move on. Now I'm going to try 49, and you spin your wheels and you go after it, and then you go after the next one. You don't ever want to leave anything blank. So timing is huge on the multiple choice questions because of the nature of the way that this exam has been redesigned. So I want to take a second here and just head over to the Q&A. Right, and to clarify just a couple of basic things. So the software for this is different. My understanding is this is different from the lockdown browser. It's different from 2020. It is different from what we know from AP Classroom. It is its own special software that requires students to practice with it, and then they will download the actual testing platform between 1 and 3 days. So any other questions or comments about digital exams themselves before we get into reading comp and writing comp? And I'm moving very quickly, but again, my goal is to give you some of the insights I've had from the test prep world. The high level goals are to get students talking about their experience, put them under the time constraint, create the artificial stress under practice so that they can reflect and improve on the next one. Taking my experience, for example, from 2000 and doing it multiple times in a row. That's the best way to approach this. So where I am now, and I'll wait, I'll see if there's any questions that pop up. Yes, Amy, the pick one letter always, there was at the Princeton Review, they called it letter of the day. You pick one letter and you just push it all the way through. The one thing I'll say about that sort of cherry picking is something like this, right? I'm going to show you how in 10 seconds I would cherry pick on a question like this. So this is from the course and exam description, of course. You guys have probably seen these before. Just wanted to stay with what's familiar. You have this women's rights activist passage from 1913. That's what the little blurb says. Let's say I'm running short on time. I read through it. I got a little bit confused. It was very 1913-ish. She's a women's rights activist in 1913. What describes the writer's exigence? Hopefully I know what that means. Hopefully I got all excited about what that word means. This is a women's rights activist in 1913. Is it a lack of interest among eligible voters? Probably not. I don't know. This isn't how I would do the problem regularly. It's how I might do it under duress. B, a growing trend of the use of using violence to address women's employment concerns. Okay, that's kind of women's history stuff. C, the limited resources available to women for changing existing power structures. That kind of sounds like a women's rights activist in 1913. Widening disparities between American and British women. Okay, that sounds like a women's rights activist. Tax rate, no. So if under duress, not having read the passage, just really trying to lunge, I talked about killing off, not randomly guessing, you're trying to eliminate bad answers. Very often, the conditioning that K-12 education does in America's schools is it says, select the best answer, select the correct answer. The way the test prep industry works is look for wrong answers or less likely to be right answers, and then aim for and do your best to get the correct one. Another thing that we always emphasize in the test prep world is get the right number of points you actually need. One of the most incredible reactions you will see from an AP student in America is when they hear what you need to get a 5 on an AP exam, right? You need a C on an AP exam to get a perfect 5. To pass the exam with a 3, you need like 58% correct on the multiple choice. You don't need to be perfect. You shouldn't try to be. You do on the ACT, where you are under time duress. You kind of basically do on the SAT, where you're under less time constraints. But on AP, you're taking a harder test that requires more intensive reading at the front end, that asks harder questions, including words like exigence. And so your job is to get as close to correct, or get the highest odds of getting it correct on as many questions as possible. It's just a slightly different way of kind of spinning the situation. And it definitely calms students' nerves a lot to realize, I don't need to be perfect here. This isn't a school test. This isn't a biology test. It isn't like these. Yes, and so Dylan's asking a question here. I'm going to take a look for a moment here at Dylan's question and the Q&A. So Dylan is asking about why aren't they letting students go back and forth? And I think when I think about the College Board's decisions from this spring, I think they were dealing with multiple factors. The colleges were telling them they have to be full exams. They were dealing exactly with what Chrissy's saying here, the cheating problem. They have to make these exams secure enough. That's why they initially went for the photo and camera ID. That was impossible to get at a couple million students. So they backed off of that, but I think they're really trying to lock the exams down. And the idea, and when I tell this to students on the social media accounts for Marco Learning on Instagram and TikTok, they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I think the reasoning is this. If you're trying to communicate with other people, you can't say, oh, I figured it out. It's number 3. We're all in the Discord server. You can't. You're trapped in each question. If the computer is offering multiple versions, and remember how many we saw in 2020, and then the students are getting questions in a slightly different order. Here in the CED, the multiple choice move in sequential order. They could, in theory, change that. Those are the ways that I think they can try to subvert student attempts to cheat. And kudos to the College Board last year for getting like dozens of different versions out so quickly. They really did confound some of those student cheating. Let's see. And the question that Chrissy's asking is really good about the algorithm. Oh yeah, and by the way, you can add a student anecdote. Come on in anytime you want, Chrissy. But I think the point about the algorithm changing for this year, or the scoring thing, the cutoffs could be different. But so there is a little bit of openness about how we present this, but definitely I think it's safe to say you don't need a 93% on the AP English language multiple choice to get a 5 on this exam. And yeah, that yes, that is one of the great mysteries, is how they pulled that off, and then ultimately how they normed this. So I want to take you to this for a moment here, and I want to give you a test prep perspective on what reading comprehension looks like. And I'm probably going to get invisible digital arrows shot at me, but just hear me out. This is the test prep perspective on multiple choice. When I look at this, I see a problem. I see a pile of words that confuses my students. It makes them sleepy and sad and defeated. And all the minutes they spend reading and annotating and telling themselves they're okay with this passage are minutes they're not spending on questions getting them right. Reading a full passage is a problem. Now, I believe you cannot skip reading comprehension passages on the AP English language exam. I think this test is impervious to that. Can you imagine it on AP Lit? I'll just skip the poem and start answering stuff. It doesn't work like that. But in the history of test preparation in the US, there's been this spectrum. Years ago, when I started at the Princeton Review in 2002, their philosophy for the SAT was, these are stupid newspaper articles. Have the kids skip the passage, go straight to the questions. That can actually work. As the passages get more sophisticated, as the questions get more sophisticated, it gets harder and harder to pull off. But you don't need to be on the other extreme of this. Oh, I think you should spend 9.5 minutes reading and annotating and doing all this stuff. Maybe not. Maybe as you talk this through with students, you encourage them to do this close reading here, and then maybe let it trail off down here at the end. That will buy them some time, and then they can go find things. Obviously, there's risks with this. The passage can take a new dimension, and this isn't, I know, I can feel discomfort. No one's saying anything, but I get the vibe, right? Because we're English teachers telling kids not to read, but you do want to think about this as a liability, and then encourage students to talk about this. One thing I've learned in test preparation of many years is you cannot fundamentally change how someone reads in a matter of a few weeks. So what you're doing with your students is allowing that diversity of reading styles and modes to become refined and optimized for test taking. So get your students talking about it. Some students write quick little headlines along the side. Kaplan, for example, used to teach reading comp where the students would kind of keep an outline over here on the side and headline each paragraph. So like justice, example from England, example of the Penguins. And you'd be kind of jotting down, not lines, but actually like a few key words. That could be a really good approach for some students. I'm the type of person, for example, when I was in college and graduate school, I didn't like taking notes. I like putting all this stuff away and being fully present in the moment. Some students might not be responding to your annotation strategy or your technique or whatever, or some technique they're getting from a video, like what, the videos we have on multiple choice at Marco Learning. Don't force the students to follow AP Daily or you or each other. Let them follow their own instincts with this, their best instincts. And let's see, a couple things real quick. And Jody's question about the digital exam, yes, there's no previewing questions. If that is a strategy you've worked on with students for digital and your digital, that's over. Literally can't exist on this exam. The extended passages, my understanding, Lauren, is it will be in full block on the left, and that those annotations will retain themselves there for that entire time, even as they're clicking through questions on the right. So you get, here's the breakdown, right? We're going to get 11 through 14 questions on that first reading comprehension passage. It'll be the same passage marked up with maybe the students spend 3 or 4 minutes on that, and then the questions are one by one. Yeah, and Karen is having some English teacher guilt that she can work out with her therapist, but it's so true, right? I felt this too. I felt this in the test prep world, and I felt it in the classroom at the university level and at the high school level where I've taught. This, like, I'm not adequate because I'm not doing what other people are doing. I do what works with my students, trust my own instincts. And yes, Lauren, to the point that Christy's making, you can also expand the passage out completely and just be fully present in reading the passage. There's an expand button that allows students to do that. And yes, so I think that the questions will probably follow a sequential order. Remember, we get 2 reading comprehension passages in a row that are each with about a dozen questions on them. So what you want to have your students discuss and debate with one another. Here's even a great Google Classroom assignment, a 1-paragraph. Actually, this is something my students, I still do with students. I have my students write a letter to their future selves. And the way the assignment works is this. Dear John, today you took a full-length practice test for AP English Language. And then I make them talk, and you can list this out in bullets. Things like, how they were feeling when they went in. Were they tired? Did they have to go to the bathroom 8 times? Were they distracted? When did they get bored? When did they panic? When did they run out of time? What are 2 things they can fix for the next test? That's that deep focused feedback. So my students will write 150 words to their future selves, and those letters become one of the ways that they organize a test prep plan. So when I have students saying, oh, I just spent so much time reading and it was so frustrating because I couldn't understand it. Then I got to the questions and the questions were easy. Without being able to preview the questions, why invest 9 minutes in reading? One thing I have students do is time themselves very explicitly. How many minutes did you spend reading? Was it 2.5? Was it 4.5? Or was it 9? And you know those kids who spend 9 minutes. I had a student, one of my 9th graders today, needed like 9.5 minutes to read something in class that was a paragraph, right? So, and that's, I'm not mocking him. That's just the speed at which he moves. Other people breeze past it so quickly. Remember that there is an occasion to read the passage again. Look at this question, number 2 from the CED, first reading passage. In the opening paragraph, the writer contrasts a hypothetical rhetorical situation with her own, primarily to. One thing we do in the test prep world is we just do this psychologically. I never let the test writers inflict their test writerliness onto my brain while I'm trying to process a question. I need to deal with this question on its own terms and translate it in the language I understand. So the writer contrasts a hypothetical rhetorical situation with her own. That's not a question. There's no question mark. So in plain English, what is this question asking? Think about that. And this is a great question that's a STEM you can use with your students. In plain English, what is this question trying to say? In fact, let's just do it as if you were my students. Let me know in the chat, in your own words, a simplified version of what this question's asking. You can leave out some of the details. In your own words, take this question with no question mark and make it a question with a question mark. And while you're doing that, yes, Margarita, definitely try that. The parameters for the letter are dear, make it corny, right? Dear so-and-so, and then they talk through their journey of taking the test and own that. Right. Right, and I like Amy's sentiment. Why is the writer doing this thing? She's got this contrast, hypothetical situation. Oh, you know, there was a man who, and then there's my own real one. Why is she setting up that contrast? This control, notice what you've done actually. You, and this is important to show students, you untangle out of test prep college board language the thing, whatever this non-question question, and you've turned it into a simple question. Why the writer decided to do this. That's really great. And that the this being contrasting the hypothetical thing. Now, when you go back to read in the passage to do the real reading you should do, you read with purpose. Why did she set up this contrast? If I were a man and I said to you this, you would understand blah, blah, blah. But since I'm a woman, it's necessary to explain why this. And then I recommend always reading a few lines above and below. So if it lists explicitly lines 1 through 10, try to get through 1 through 15. Notice the strategy I'm proposing, where let's just say you spend 3 minutes on this whole thing at the front end, actually is one that encourages deeper and better and more English teachery kind of reading. Again, here, with a question as the lens through which you interpret this. That's what I have my students do. I like to have my students read twice. Once to get their bearings, sort out a little bit of who, what, where, when, why. She's a women's rights activist. She doesn't like this. Here's her solution. Nobody's going to help her. Here's what she says. 1, 2, 3. Simple thing. I don't write a lot of annotations. I don't have a way of teaching it. It's just not my style as a test taker. I get to the question. I own this question. I translate it into my own language that I can understand. I go back, I read with that lens. And then, now this is the key, the hardest part in AP English language in following this process is to generate my own answer. She does it in order to, half the time and more on AP English language, I can't come up with why in my own words. So I have to be reactive and responsive. It'd be so great if I came into this and said, oh, she's doing it in order to show the other guy is wrong. She's doing it in order to set up the essay really well. Whatever my kind of back of the napkin version of this. Instead, since I don't have an answer, I have to be reactive to the actual words they give me here. Now, one of the handouts I have for you, I want to show you, oh, this is it's called the Multiple Choice Study Guide. The Multiple Choice Study Guide that we have at Marco breaks this down by passage type, question type, and by wrong answer type. And this is a really good thing to encourage students to see. Wrong answers tend to be too absolute and too simplistic and very often off topic. Correct answers have just the right amount of defensibility. One tool that I use with students, you guys can use with yours, is something like this. Imagine that the person writing this test had to defend answer choice A, I think that A is the correct answer of this one, A in a court of law. And that somebody was countersuing that C was correct. They were suing for $1 million. And this is, by the way, that's what subjectivity is in our classes. Like if your class is like mine, right, it's a highly subjective personal experience, an aesthetic experience, even when we're reading texts and we don't have one correct answer and 4 incorrect answers. Forget all that. It's a standardized test. There's one correct answer that's defensible with proof text in a court of law. Imagining this, a proof text, by the way, is a word coming from fundamentalism, going back to the Quran or to the Bible and finding that verse that shows that your doctrine is right. Insofar as you are able to back up a claim with something specific from the text that is vaguely worded enough to survive that kind of scrutiny, but specific enough to be correct to that moment, that's what you're looking for. So get students to talk about this. One thing I do want to show you real quick, we have this, in fact, I'll put this, I'm going to publish all of these. And let me share this and this and this. Okay, so I've got 3 lesson plans in the chat for you. One of them is about reading questions. So this is a new passage your students have not seen about Thomas Jefferson. And look what we did. We actually stripped away all the answer choices, just like what I did before. And the whole idea is that the students will write their own answer to the question first. They go to that step of the process where they're back here and they're trying to think, why did she do this? Okay. And then they practice it, and then they get to actually see questions and explanations that go with it. So this is a really good practical tool I can send you out the door with on multiple choice reading that shows this process at work. So reading is going to be challenging for all of the reasons that we've just described. Students can't go back and forth. Timing is really important. Annotation is really important, and the distribution of time across, let's call them the two reads. The first read, which is here, which I'm proposing is as fast as 3 minutes for me. And the second read, which is the incremental adding up of a close read with that in mind. Okay, I'm gonna take a minute and check out the, yeah, I think I've answered all these before. And yeah, let me see real quick. Yeah, Lauren's question here is, I tell them to start looking at the verbs. That's a great idea. And on some AP exams, some standardized tests that really get you very far. This could be a challenge for students. I mean, and you immediately see how students let's say they're taking practice questions in the fall semester, right? They immediately are terrified by this. Keep reminding them about that lower bar. They don't need 100% correct. Keep reminding them that by dint of repetition and practice, they can familiarize themselves with the sort of language that appears over and over again. For example, number 7, and I'll do this before I move on to writing very quickly. In the context of the passage, all of the following phrases refer to the same idea, except, okay, this answer, if this question were to appear on the digital exam, you'd have to have the whole passage on the left. For me, from a test prep perspective, number 7 is a nightmare on a digital exam. I can't come back to it. I would just say to my students, come back to it. Why would I say come back to a question like this? From a test prep perspective, from getting the most points as quickly as possible. Yes, and Melania, to clarify, my understanding is that the full passage will be on the left and scrollable up and downable, and that on the right-hand side will be individual questions that go off. It's kind of 2 windows. Let me just show it to you all real quick. So again, this is the passage that they can scroll up and down on. On the DBQ in history, they can move across documents. And but the question is going to have them go back and forth. So that's something to keep in. Yes, and what people are saying about the question I just had up was this kind of critical lens. I'm guessing that in your class every day, you don't focus in such a maniacal and obsessive way on timing and points and what's going to get me. The amount of time I have to invest to get this question correct makes getting it correct a Pyrrhic victory. I could spend 3 minutes and I've carefully line checked each of these things. Good job, me. I just stole 3 minutes from the back end of the test I can't get back. So if you've studied yourself as a test taker so well that you know you have the time, I have the time. We have the time. All of us taking this, we have the time. We're smart people. We'll get it right. Take the time. Take 3 minutes. Some of your students will study themselves and know that they can't do it. They don't have the time. So that's an urgent issue for a lot of people, making sure that they have that they understand themselves as test takers so well that they are able to do this. Let's see. Yeah, and let me just see real quick. Yeah, and I see a couple of other things. The takes too long covers most of this passage. Okay. Another thing I want to show you all is writing. And this I've got just a few minutes before. This is from the course and exam description, which is the sample writing questions. And this is something that it's sort of ridiculous for me to pretend like I'm an expert in this. I have seen this type of question from olden days, kind of on the SAT2 writing, kind of on ACT, kind of on SAT. It's not quite like any of them. It also isn't so content focused or kind of test prep focused that I think These question types, these writing question types that look like this, have tended to be the more test preppable kinds of questions than reading comp. It always goes math is the most preppable, then writing and grammar, and then reading. In the test prep industry, most of the results are gained on math, then on writing, then on reading. So there's probably more room to gain on these, but none of us have multiple years of experience teaching these. So I think at a high level, the issue is making students realize what goes into something like number 10. So let me read this out loud. And then I'll get to some more questions here. So the writer wants an effective transition from the introductory paragraph to the main idea of a passage. This is a great conversation starter. What does that mean? What's a transition? And what does a transition have to do to get you from the introductory paragraph to the main idea? Officially, what they're seeing here is supposed to represent a piece of student writing, like college freshman writing. And the question that we get is a way of building that transition. So it says, which of the following best achieves this purpose? Don't let their eyes get filled with all the test writer's ideas in the multiple choice. Let them try to get a grip on it first. Students are actually very good at this once they've practiced it. This is something you can accomplish in the next 5 or 6 weeks that you can't accomplish on the reading comp. You cannot change how students read fundamentally. You can sharpen up their timing and make them more self-reflective. And but on the writing, you can find that improvement because students have, I think, some better instincts. Just a couple of quick comments here. It looks like, yes, for Jerry, all of the handouts that I published will be available in the recording for everyone who's registered. And if you're watching this on YouTube in the recording, we'll post the link where you can go get all of these handouts and make sure that they're available. And Tamar, I see your question about that handout. I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to look at it. So I will move on. Yes, and by the way, we will, Christy's following up. We will be offering some more on all of that. Natalie, for the 3 minutes on the first read, I just want to take one step back to reading before I get back to a quick overview of writing. This is an arbitrary number. This is the number that works for me. I don't like my students to spend less than 2 to 3 minutes on that first read, but I'm anxious about them spending 5 to 6 minutes. And let me know in the chat, have any of you ever had students who get caught in, what can I call it? The self-defeating anxiety paradox nightmare of reading too much. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where they read themselves into a mess. They get confused and frustrated, and they keep trying to dig themselves out of this hole of effectively reading too much by reading some more. If that's an experience, that's a very real experience that hundreds of my students have had. When we talk about this on our discussion all the time, yes, okay. So what I want you guys to do with your students when you're talking to them is acknowledge this. It's a real thing. It happens to a lot of people. It's happened to you. If I gave you all MCAT organic chemistry passages, maybe some of you are medievalists, some of you are organic chemists, you might know, but we would be like, we're reading the science paper and it's just getting more and more daunting. Own it as something that we go through as teachers ourselves. So coming back again to the writing, one thing I want to share with you all, you see there's a lesson plan here on the writing questions itself. This is just there for you. Hopefully it's useful. You'll see kind of thinking through. We have a teacher document in there where the students can think through, or you have a cheat sheet for thinking through why each of these choices is correct or incorrect. So hopefully that's a valuable thing. The third lesson plan I put up there is actually a multiple choice reflection question. So I want to come back real quick to a slide I showed at the beginning. And by the way, I know that we are at time, and let me just see real quick. I want to come back to this slide, and then I will show you a couple other things. I said at the beginning that test preparation is maniacally obsessed on getting the right number of points as quickly as possible. Think about the things that you do that you love doing as a teacher, the real reason you're teaching. And then for the next 5 weeks, maybe push that to the side and focus. If you're doing test prep, focus on what will raise scores and get your students in that mindset too. They like to win. They like to play the game of these points. Focus on practicing under timed conditions. This is vital for that moment I explained at the beginning in 2000 when I botched the time in practice, was on the line between a 3 and a 4, got a 5 on the real exam because I made one key move. I did that. She gave me deep feedback, Mrs. Lasko, and I did some real looking in the mirror and saying to myself, watch the clock. And then I stuck to that plan. A lot of students panic and throw their plan out the window. Encourage students that that's perfectly normal, but that they're not going to do it because they've come up with a written plan. Analyzing yourself, understanding your plan is going to be key. I want to show you one other thing real quick, and this is in the handouts tab, not that. I want to show 2 resources we have for you. One is a study planner, and I think this is called, okay, I've got the productivity planner and the student calendar. I just shared 2 new documents. Calling this a student calendar. It's a fillable PDF we made. It's just blank on the right. These are all blanks. And there's a second page covering May and June as well on that file. And the students, this is a great thing for them to sit down with. You notice what we say? We say, get all the dates and times of your exams. A lot of kids are taking multiple exams. Get all of your personal dates and other things going on. Sunday the 4th is Easter Sunday. Maybe you're not working that day. Organize resources. We link to the Perfection Learning book. We link to AP Classroom. We link to the Marco Learning page. Remember, on our YouTube channel, we have 54 videos for AP Lang. If you didn't get enough out of tonight's session for multiple choice philosophy of reading and writing on AP Lang and Lit, we have whole stacks of videos on our channel that get into some of that, some that I do, some that Elena Vernon does. Those are available for you. So this study planner, I think, is a really great way for the kids to think about themselves and think about a plan. We don't have a ton of content to study for this exam, but we do have work to do, timed essays to write, feedback to get, and self-reflection to do. This is a great way to sort all of that out. The other thing is a day-by-day planner. So this is a filled-in version. Plugging Beloved, my favorite book from high school. And you'll see it's a fillable PDF. This is the top half of it. It's one of these day sheet time block planners. And this is a really great thing. I use them for myself, but these are really great for students as well. It's called Productivity Planner. We have an article on it on our website on how to use it. So that's available for students as well for that self-reflection work, because test prep is not just about doing questions over and over again. It's about doing questions, looking in the mirror and fixing your problems. Great. And Andrew's recommending those AP Classroom videos. Again, these are linked right here for the students. And of course, they're accessing them anyway. So definitely check out that. Also, Tim Freitas on the Garden of English, one of the sponsors of our event here, does amazing work on his channel as well. Let's see.
Yeah, there were some questions about the timing and how, there were, I think, mentions about process of elimination and such. And I actually think Tim did a video very recently kind of about that process of elimination factor. And his video was really on choosing that lead distractor and the correct answer. And so it might be worth checking out that video as well on his Garden of English YouTube. Because that might be helpful if we're talking about how can we very quickly and efficiently, if we teach process of elimination, how can we do that in a more efficient way considering the circumstances this year?
Yes, and by the way, I've just posted a link, Chrissy, to the Garden of English YouTube page. That's a subscriber link. You can access that video there. I love Tim's stuff, and I think one thing I'll leave you with, process of elimination, it's ironic that I didn't spend 20 minutes on it because it's a key part, looking for wrong answers and what wrong answers look like. It's on that one study guide I shared, but it is a key contribution the test prep industry has done. The simplest thing, the biggest mistake I think teachers make with process of elimination is thinking of it as like, oh, well, I'll kind of get rid of a couple of answers and then I'll kind of I get down to a couple and then I'll pick one. No, process of elimination inverts the way of thinking completely. It means you are on a tear looking for wrong answers everywhere. That's like your full-time job, looking for wrong answers and being unhappy with answers and then seeing what floats to the top. It means a lot of questions get down to 50-50. Here's something that's crazy. If you accurately get every AP English language multiple choice question down to 50-50 and just guess, and let's say you guess just above 50, you're in that 3 range. And so this is Interesting. So what I'm going to do, everyone, we're just past an hour. We started a few minutes after 7:30. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and thank you all for coming.